Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
Hello. Well, welcome to this Conveyancing Matters. And Stu and I, we're really delighted to introduce Shaun Spalding, who is a lovely, accountant by profession. And Shaun, you'll tell us a bit about yourself in a minute. But we came across you in relation to a chat we had about land registry electronic signatures. So I'll talk about that more in a minute. But Shaun, do you want to just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background. You've only just relatively recently started your role at Avant Advisory. So set the scene for us, Shaun.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Stu. Yeah, great to be here. Yeah, so my name's Shaun Spalding. As you say, I'm a chartered accountant by sort of first education, and I've been an accountant in practice, and I've been a CFO for a business, and then sold it. Then I sort of moved over and I became an IT director for my previous company, and then moved over again to do project management. So I like to think I've got that sort of seen the journey of operations, IT and finance. So what I'm trying to do at Avant Advisory, well, what we're trying to do is the digital transformation piece. So really every industry has got something to do, somewhere to go with digital transformation, but they need some help to get there. How do they get online? How do we wow our customers? How do we take things forward with data? So that's really what we're all about.
Brilliant. Well, that's the word, the D word there, Shaun. I mean, the D word for me for a long time has been dream bar, but now it's digital. And that, of course, as I said, is how we came across you and met you on LinkedIn, if you like, because you might remember that Stu and I did a Conveyancing Matters chat, obviously from the conveyancers' perspective, property lawyers' perspective, about the land registry announcement, which they slipped out in a blog in July 2020 on the fact that they would accept witnessed electronic signatures. Really, I think as a response to the COVID situation and the difficulty that conveyancers were experiencing over summer in particular, and continue to do about seeing their clients face to face. And you had some really interesting views on that in particular. All I see is risk for conveyancers. So we thought that that might be a good place to start this conversation, really. So Stu, what are your thoughts about digitisation more generally for conveyancers?
I think the first thing to sort of bring up is obviously any kind of change. We're all very nervous, especially in our industry where we have very preset procedures, which are part of the Law Society's protocol. And then moving on to any change that we implement, it's the risk that's attached to it. And, are we opening ourselves up to more risk by encouraging digital signatures? So I think the starting point, is definitely that, because that's what most lawyers will be worried about, that by accepting these signatures in this fashion, are we putting our head above the pit to be shot at here?
Yeah, and I think it's about proportionality, isn't it? I think that's a discussion we're having in 2020. What's the proportional management of your own risk? I mean, and we talk about risk, and there's advantages as well, right? We know that conveyancing has to get quicker in terms of the time that it takes a transaction to complete. And I was looking at the SRA statistics for sort of consumer satisfaction. And I think the good news from that was that 46% of your customers said they were very satisfied with conveyancing. 30% said they were quite satisfied. And although they trumpeted that to say, 76% are really happy, are they? 30% of your customers, when you said, were you happy? How was your conveyancer? And they said, yeah, it was all right. Yeah, it was not bad. That's not a ringing endorsement of your industry, is it? And the way you turn these people from sort of on the level to like wowzers is you just improve their journey. COVID, we've got working from home. We should extend that to say, well, how do you have the buyer and your client's journey? How do they buy from you from home as well? And digital signatures at the end of that process, I think, that starts from, signing the terms of instruction doing the KYC on their phones and sending you the KYC on their phones and having it all come all the way through the journey. I think that's how you get the benefit of these things.
Shaun, are you able to comment on this, and forgive me, I come at this from a point of complete ignorance. I can do bold and italic, and that is literally about it. What sort of tech, what sort of platforms, what sort of kit might conveyancing firms have to sort of get on the digital journey? And particularly I'm thinking, about the digital signatures, because you don't need an all singing, all dancing case management software at, bit of kit at the cost of many hundreds of thousands of pounds. Because I think a lot of conveyancers are just going to see even just the IT infrastructure you might need as a barrier. So what would you say to those firms who are wary because of that?
Yeah, I'd say it's quite a low investment. You've got kit that we're all probably using now, which is a PC, a microphone, a webcam. The software providers will come into this game because they'll have the two-factor authentication, and it will come down to how much they charge for that. The more if you want it, the more will come into the market. The cheaper it will be, I think. And when it comes to to things like video, we were talking about sort of risk, and one of the things is to try and understand what you think is that you need to do that Dr. Pepper thing. What's the worst that's going to happen? So if it's as simply as, well, we don't know, even with two-factor authentication, we're not quite sure who's signing. Well, you can do a simple thing of when they are doing that signing, you can have a Zoom meeting like this, or you can have an MS Teams meeting, hit the record button and actually record them both, signing at the same time. And then you've got things like AWS Glacial these days, they're sort of peanuts to store that data in for your six years.
What about again the sort of data storage thing, Shaun? What because we've got multiple factors, haven't we? And obviously with your accountancy background, you'd understand this. Obviously we've got just the issue of client confidentiality and the detail of data storage, and of course that used to be just lobbing a paper file in a warehouse somewhere or in your loft. And of course sort of GDPR. So what concerns do firms need to have around retaining that digital evidence that somebody signed their mortgage deed on the 19th of October 2020?
Yes, yeah. So I'll often sort of sound quite sort of blasé about these things, because there are hackers there, and they'll get you wherever you put your stuff if they put their mind to it. Some of these things is what I call the Uncle Albert syndrome. Very very rarely will you get someone sort of come in and say, hello, my name's Bob and I'm change resistant. It's because people will always rationalize what that change resistance is, and it's Uncle Albert because of the episode of Only Fools and Horses, when he was sort of trying to look horrified when Rodney was taking a girl other than his wife to the cinema. I don't know if you remember that episode, but I speak with sort of some people and I say, right, well, you just need to move everything into the cloud, and they go cyber security. And I think sometimes, perhaps with you conveyancers, when we talk about things like digital signatures or digital KYC, maybe the tendency is to go PI insurance.
I'm slightly embarrassed now.
So of course, yeah, you have, there is a risk there, but rather than rather than giving to the temptation to use it as inertia, I think just look at how, what the problem is and how you sort of get around it, because I think if you've got your data now that's digitized and it's on premise, if you're just doing nothing more than putting that into the cloud, or having a digital signature, I don't personally see that you're increasing your risk profile. In fact, quite the opposite. If you speak to some people like Microsoft and Amazon Web Services, they'll tell you that they are far safer than your local providers, because they've got hundreds of £1,000s paid experts who are monitoring this all day. Now I'm very conscious that any of your IT managed service providers are watching this, they're absolutely screaming at me down the, and they're itching for their keyboard, you know. But I think look at the, you know, the proportionality of the risk that you think you're taking is what I'd say.
Definitely.
To that risk, though, Stu, as someone who runs a large law firm?
I suppose there's a number of different things you've got to look at here, isn't there? And, you know, you could argue that, you know, the risk element is with us in everything we do. If we send a contract to the client via email, ask them to print it and sign it. If we send a contract in the post to a client, ask them to sign it. Is there not inherent risk in doing that? You know, how do we know that the person we're sending it to is the client that's selling the property? You know, there's got to be risk in, I suppose, everything we do. So I suppose, you know, what's coming out of, you know, Shaun's sort of expertise is managing that risk, isn't there? And if there's risk in everything we do, there's got to be benefits in doing this as long as the risk is not too high. And, you know, I agree with you, you know, in terms of sort of storage of data, you know, is there any more risk putting stuff in the cloud than having it on a desktop that could be pinched out of an office? You've got staff that work on that desktop. You know, there's risk everywhere we go, isn't there?
Do you have any feeling, Shaun? Well, I suppose just on the issue of risk before I go on to that, I mean, because I sort of try to tell nonsense on this stuff because that's my default position. But I suspect that might be the default position of quite a lot of conveyancers, to be honest with you, Shaun. Because I just think, well, if the man that set up Twitter can have his Twitter account hacked, then, you know, there is a crushing irony in that. But can you give any reticent conveyancers, you know, heads of department, Shaun, how do we quantify the risk? You're an accountant, you come at stuff from a really completely different direction to us, but what can I do to help me assess the risk that I might be taking in taking these digital steps forward? Whether it's a case management system, which isn't particularly risky, whether it's sticking it all in the cloud, which might be more so, whether it's moving on to digital signatures, which I think represents a different sort of risk. But how can firms attempt to put a value on that risk? How do we assess the extent of it? Yeah,
so the other hat that I wear is that I also, at my previous firm, I did the GDPR, you know, the data protection, you know, as a data protection officer for the company. So what you do for that is it's very similar to, you know, what financial auditors do, in that they'll do a sort of a assessment of your system and sort of capture at what points you're capturing, you know, personal data, what you're doing with that on its journey. You know, when are you sending the data protection notice? What legal base are you using to, you know, to process that? And where are you storing it? How? And where, you know, your IT managed service provider or your internal IT, you know, should already have been very much involved in all of this, is things like segregating the data. You know, so if you're doing again, going back to the digital signatures, you know, that ought to be a one-off, you know, sort of exercise that's not connected to your main database. So if somebody is hacking that, or, you know, or getting in that way, you know, they can't get further into your system. You know, I think that those cybersecurity practices, even before GDPR, should have been in there. You know, so if you're worried about your IT side, it sounds harsh, but change your provider, or get your provider in to tell you why you shouldn't be worried, or rather you should be worried, but they've done all that they can to minimize the damage when these guys perhaps will get in. In fact, I woke up this morning, I haven't read the headline, but it seems that Foxtons have had a hack that Property Eye are saying this morning. So it's, you know, it will happen, but what do they get? How do they get it? How far in do they get?
I think also for those sort of non-lawyers watching, just to sort of put it into context as to why, as a property lawyer, you're very susceptible. You know, we hold vast volumes of information regarding that client, and on top of that, those clients are then transacting, you know, with hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of monies, buying houses. You know, there's not too much more in terms of value that, you know, people spend on. So we are an everyday target, and I think that's why so many lawyers have such a concern. You know, every single day we're a target to the cyber criminals, And the points you make there are, you know, real simple. You know, keeping sort of that information in a different place in terms of signatures makes perfect sense to me.
So, Shaun, what should, you know, a busy head of department, a conveyancing department, who, you know, frankly, right now in the vortex that they're in from a work point of view, you know, probably don't know what day of the week it is, just extraordinarily busy, can't get their head above their desk. What should a conveyancing department then be asking their IT, you know, provider, whether it's internal or external? What are the questions they should be asking their IT team? And I'm sorry to strip it back to something so simple, but you know, what are the basic questions? What does the conveyancer need to be asking for, that head of department? What do they need their IT team to do?
Okay, yeah. So again, I think have them in and ask what they have done, what risks, you know, they have identified and mitigated. What sort of extra systems, you know, have you got? I mean, you talked about you know, sort of posts coming in and out. You know, it can, if you're insisting on using posts, and I'd say, you know, let's get your clients onto digital as soon as possible. You know, because it's better, but that starts from sort of scanning the invoice in, right? You know, so where does that scan to? You know, what happens to it, you know, after that? What protections have they put in place to, you know, stop your people and a sort of a malignant actor in your firm, you know, getting, you know, information out? You know, how can they get to things like WeTransfer? How can they get to their, you know, personal email, you know, if at all? And like I say, that I think it's, for me, it's that it's a GDPR journey. And okay, you might say, well, GDPR has nothing to do with IT. Well, I think it is actually, because like I say, because that will create the data map of what you're collecting, when, and what's happening to it in the process. And when you do that walkthrough, you quite often see some escape routes, or you think, oh, even you yourselves, when you think you know everything that goes on, you think, oh, I didn't realize that was happening. I didn't realize some people, you know, were doing that. So it's that sort of 1% thing, isn't it? It's closing down little bits by just having a look at things. And we all know that, you know, you guys are targeted on the money, isn't it? That's where you've got your biggest risk. As at the point where, you know, you're transmitting money over, you've got to make sure that that's gone to the, you know, to the right bank account. You know, you're not sending it, you know, to somewhere else. So that's where I think that whole trail over when you've collected it, and you know, what's the final double check on where you're sending it. That's why I think the focus will be on that one.
So what then, Shaun, thinking then about the witnessed electronic signatures, which, as I say, was the Land Registry's big sort of hoo-ha over summer, slightly late, I think, was Stu's view. If COVID, helping us with COVID was the rationale behind it. Personally, I don't think it was, but I think it was all just to make life a bit easier for them. But there we go. But you mentioned two-factor authentication. So what the Land Reg broadly have said is they have just set out their requirements. They do not take on any liability in the event of fraud. So again, it's up to the conveyancer to make sure that the platform that they use with this two-factor authentication kind of works and is secure. So if, as Stu mentioned earlier, Shaun, you know, I'm a busy conveyancer and I've got somebody, you know, pitching their platform to me on Zoom, what, because I can't see them face to face, what questions what should I be asking that provider to help me decide whether their platform is good enough for me to use and be prepared to take on that risk? How does that, what views do you have on that?
Yeah, well, and certainly, yeah, I'll sort of deflect the question a little bit and saying that, yeah, we're focusing on risk, you know, whereas I'd first start from, you know, this is good, isn't it? You know, these digital signatures, you know, the unique reference numbers that are coming in from the, you know, the up my street sort of thing. You know, these are all good things that you guys as conveyancers have just got to jump on. You know, I know that you fend off, you know, you had Russell Quirk here the other day, or you're batting off, you know, is conveyancing broken, you know. And I think, you know, and I do feel for you guys, especially. I think I wouldn't want to be you guys in March next year when when everybody's trying to get over the line. You know, so I feel.
We're all going on holiday in April, Sean. There's going to be nothing.
Permanent holiday, I want to, yeah.
2 months. He's got it booked.
So I think, yes, I think just to really, you know, get you know, your customers on that journey, get conveyancing sped up. And when I say sped up, I'm not blaming you guys for the way that it's slow at the moment. I think that you ought to be going on to this, you know. So I mean, I know nothing about, for example, you know, I'm a sort of early adopter of these things, you know. So when it comes to, I'm not sort of selling this house or moving. However, if I would, you know, I know nothing about, you know, sort of Peter Ambrose and the property partnership. I know nothing about him as a person, how good they are. You might tell me, well, you wouldn't, I'm sure, there, but you might tell me they're rubbish. But all I know is that they seem to have been the first firm that transacted with a digital signature. So that actually makes me want to phone him up first, or look at them first and say, what's your prices? How do you do? You know, so I think that's what you should also have a mindset when you're talking to these software providers. Yes, you've got to put them through the mill, but actually think to yourself that, yeah, I want this myself. So it's a case of the more of us who tell these providers this is what we want, the more are going to come to us, and the cheaper it's going to be. I know I'm talking too much, but I actually see these providers, if they get it right, it will be a benefit for you. You know, if you go and look at this sort of Dreamvar, you know, case, which is your famous signature case, I guess, you know, and you know, one of the things is that, you know, they didn't ask the selling solicitor to confirm that they've taken all, you know, reasonable steps to verify the identity of the seller. Well, if you've got a caseware thing that's sending off an automated email and you're getting a response, perhaps even with a 2-factor response, that's in your audit trail. So if anything comes to you later, you can say, I verified that. The same with this thing about, have they got, you know, a UK bank account, and has it been open, you know, for 12 months? You know, you can have an automated process that sort of collects that information. You know, okay, with open banking these days, you know, maybe the banks will start to play ball on that one as well. And I think that's the other bit that you get from these systems. If you digitize now, then there are bits that will add on later, because other people like banks will come more to the party, and you're placed to benefit from that.
And what's your view, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, Sean. I think that the industry as a whole will probably have no choice but to adopt it, because I think the client will ultimately want to go down that road anyway. And I think it will probably be a similar situation to whereby now we have so many automated systems that do the ID check-in. You know, they're becoming more and more frequent, more and more popular. And as an industry, I think we can all now see how, you know, initially we were fearful because, again, there was the risk, there was the liability aspect of it all, and there was the process change. But now we've gone through that sort of 2-3 year period. It seems crazy when you look back that we weren't doing it, you know, all that time before. So I just think this is another extension of the process that we undertake that will hopefully mean it's, you know, using your word, Sean, that the journey that the client has becomes, you know, cleaner, slicker. And yeah, hopefully that will make our life easier as well.
I
didn't really answer your question, some of the things that you should ask, you know, and I think if you infer from what I said is ask them about what these sort of audit trails, you know, are, and how, you know, authentic they are. I would also, me personally, and again, I know there's lots of, you know, Alberts out there, you know, I would personally not look at anyone who's not got it in the cloud. Yeah, I would put it into the cloud straight away, and I would ask them, what's your API? API is the way that, you know, programs integrate, you know, with each other. You know, so what you're looking for is a sort of an open API, an easy API. Accountants at the moment are piling in multiple numbers into, you know, a system called Xero, if you've heard of it. You know, Xero itself, it's you know, it's a tin of baked beans. It does what it says on the tin. What makes it powerful is they've got a big app family, where they've got lots of specialist providers who are doing, you know, if you're a hairdresser, if you're a mechanic, you know, and they'll have something that's special. But because they've got the API connector, you always know that you can keep things in one system. So with your providers, I'd look at, you know, especially some of the older sort of legacy ones can tend to be quite protective of it. I'll be looking for them to say, we're open, we're looking to make a family, we're open to let people in. And if your own developers want to do something, this is a really easy structure for your coders to, you know, to work out and latch onto.
I think actually you've hit on a really, really important point for firms more generally there, because obviously, Shaun, we're talking about the conveyancer perspective, but what I think a lot of firms that have found, what a lot of law firms have found, is that they bought or, you know, invested in a case management system, which they then spent huge amounts of money having to have adapted to fit particular practice areas. And that idea that you know, different practice areas have different needs. I mean, a lot of the basic information and requirement is the same, but that idea that you can kind of plug in and get sort of different elements. And also, if you're a, you know, if you're a small conveyancing organisation, well, the fact that you just want the platform and that bit, you don't want all the other bits, because you don't do litigation and you don't all the rest of it. So I think that's a really, really important point, actually, and a really important question.
And that also is the sign of a legacy provider, isn't it? That bit about you have to buy the whole of the brain, where you know you're only going to use 1/3 of the brain. Yeah, they're going to charge you for everything anyway. Yeah, they should have been breaking it down into modules by now, I would say. And I know I must admit, I put my hands up, I don't really know anything about the different software providers that you guys have. But yeah, I'd imagine it's the same as most industries. You've got a popular legacy one, and you've got a few challengers that are, you know, biting away, and they're the ones that are coming to see you. And yeah, perhaps not articulating sometimes. I know in your previous video you said they're sometimes not articulating what they're going to do, you know, for you guys. To be fair to them, I think sometimes they're sort of hard benefits, and I know you use the sort of thing about, you know, they tell me about problems I didn't know I had, and actually, well, if they're solving that, then that gives you hours in your day back, then why not? I would emphasize, to be fair to them, there's going to be these soft benefits that you guys don't know yet. You know, you don't know, I don't know, because we don't know what's coming down the road in 3 years' time. Like I say, that you're going to be able to capitalize on very, very quickly, because you've done the hard work and, you know, moved to one of these types of systems. And I do think that, you know, the banking world has gone through a revolution. You know, everybody keeps quiet about it because it's only sort of bankers and sad accountants like me who get, you know, excited about it, you know, but they've gone through this open banking revolution where, thanks to the last gift of the EU to us, I think, was that they mandated that all of the banks make a standard API, you know, whether you're, you know, so you don't have to make something for Lloyd, something for NatWest. And that means that, you know, all of these payment systems, you know, can link into them, and you can, you know, the edges are blurred between what's your accounting system and what's your bank and what's another system. And I think that has to be coming down the road in conveyancing. Like I say, you might have an open banking that will confirm this person, without giving you any personal details about them, they've had a UK bank account, you know, for 12 months. You know, the land registry, you know, other solicitors, you know, you're going to be able to exchange information in a standard and automated way, but only if you're all sort of moving to, you know, to something that's, you know, one step up from steam power. And sorry, I'm not, that's not to say that you're all on steam powered now, but I just know that every industry, yeah, by default has further to go.
I think that's a really, really interesting point. What's your experience, Stu, on the case management system point that Shaun was making?
You really want to go down that road? Using all parts of the brain is a fantastic, you know, analogy to use, isn't it? Because I mean, with all the case management systems we use, they're not bespoke for conveyancing. They're for multi sort of law functional practices. And sometimes I think, because, you know, conveyancing is sort of that standalone kind of area of law that doesn't cross reference. And I do think that, you know, as you said, Shaun, there are sort of pretenders in the market, and there's a lot of old products that are out there. I just think, as a complete generalisation within the legal industry, whether there's the want for change, whether there's the financial clout behind it to change. I do think digitally we are lacking behind as a comparable to other industries. And that definitely leads right from the front with our case management systems. And like you say, the integration with other systems. Quite often we've got this crazy scenario whereby, we're logging into, Christ knows how many different systems and doing work through so many different channels. If you could just put it all in one big ball, it would be a damn sight easier.
One big family, I'd say, and that's the thing, because the developers themselves, they can't do everything. That's why Xero have that open approach that they have, because they know they can't do it and they don't want to do it. Let the specialists who want to serve that niche do it, and then know that they can come back to you. I would say, you said financial clout again. If you're going the sort of the cloud route, that's a subscription-based model. I know some of your sort of FDs, will prefer the CapEx model rather than the OpEx. But if you're paying subscriptions, and again, that's the other thing to ask and make sure, to me, a subscription is a rolling monthly. You effectively renew them each month, and if you don't like them or there's something better comes along, you shift over. I forgot I must admit, I forgot the next point I was going to say there. No, sorry, it's gone. Yep.
All right.
Except, of course, what I find, Shaun, when I'm teaching is that I can look at a class and try and, get them to inspire me to say what the next thing I was going to say, but then they don't come up with it. I just get 20 faces looking at me. But actually, Shaun, I think, again, another kind of interesting point, though, for conveyancers is, you've talked about sort of pretenders in the market, and what we naturally tend to do is sit back and try and look and see where the front runner's going to be, because you don't want to back the wrong horse. And that, I think, is probably another, maybe to sort of almost finish where we started, that's another reason for inertia, is well, we'll sit back and wait, because, as I say, we don't want to back the wrong horse, and we don't want to make this investment, whether, monthly, annual, whatever, only to find that the provider we decided to use, hasn't developed in the way that we thought they might. So do many providers that you know of, Shaun, kind of do the, most of us have to have a tie-in. Most of us, you have to tie into a product for a long period of time. What would you advise firms to do in that regard?
No, I think if you're talking to anybody with that tie-in, then I think you're talking to a legacy firm, who are about to be disrupted. I'd say steer clear. Like I just said, if you're it should be a monthly license, and okay, they'll give you the way they get around that is they'll give you a 50% discount because you'll sign up for a year. You'll sign up whether 100 user desks in your thing for a year. That's slightly different from from a sort of legacy position. I remember what I was going to say. Yes, I think I do recognise that as conveyancers you're quite fragmented. I think as an industry, aren't you? That there isn't one big sort of like in the auditing, you've got the big four, and you look at what they do. So maybe I don't know how much you sort of talk to each other. I mean, you're doing a great thing with this sort of chat that you're doing. I mean, and you can also work with the the CLC, what's it, the Conveyancing Licensing Committee of
the regulators, the SRA. I mean, they're all there. Whether they're prepared to talk is another matter. But
well, I was about to say, how much they can you get them to move from a regulatory body to a to promoting body? I mean, when I hear CLC, I must admit I have images of like Ken Livingstone and the GLC, so maybe they need to have a better name, but actually, what organisations like the RICS, and I've come from, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, what they're quite good at, and the ACCA, which is my accounting body, is they have like a tech affiliate program. So when again, if we go back to, to risk, that you started this sort of, conversation off, is they will, the software providers will go to those bodies and they'll say, can you have a look at my software and say, A, it's doing what your members need to do because it's abiding by your rules, and B, it meets a sort of a minimum category of risk. So they go through that sort of assessment program, and then they're given a nice little Blue Peter badge, when they're on their marketing brochures. So when they're coming to you, if it's got SRA approved or affiliate or CLC affiliate on it, then you guys can presumably get a bit more confidence from that. I would say that just as the Peter Ambrose property partnership, I have no idea what he's sort of done, but he's obviously done something. But actually, if it's that early adopter, late adopter thing. Yes, there are risks of being an early adopter, but actually, if you find a horse that you think this is gonna romp home, if you get on that and you back it, then you're going to see a benefit, and you're going to be 6 months, a year, 2 years ahead of your competition, I'd say. And if you leave it too long, you're just going to blockbuster video yourself out of the market. So
I think that's what would beat to Max, to be quite frank. Well, Shaun, that's all really hugely interesting, and has made me think of things I hadn't thought of. If people in firms want to sort of get in touch with you to maybe chat things through with you, Shaun, would you be happy to talk to them? Happy for us to put out your details?
Absolutely, no problems at all. Yeah, always very happy to have chats with excellent people like yourselves.
Oh, bless you. Thanks. Any other points, Stu?
No, I think that just about covers it.
Oh, bless you. Well, as I say, it's really, really delightful to see you, Shaun. Really, really kind of you to share your thoughts with us, because it's a broader perspective than many conveyancers will take, and hopefully, it will make maybe make the conveyancers adopt the digital revolution a bit more quickly. So thanks so much.
I feel like a Jehovah's Witness. If some of you sort of guys, if only one person converts on this phone call, then I'm happy. Yeah,
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.